What's up, YouTube? Zero here, and today I have the unlikely pairing of Single Strike Urshifu and Pangoro in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually. I'll talk about why these cards gel so well together and why you should not overlook this deck. Definitely don't overlook Single Strike Urshifu, a phenomenal card that when in the right deck, when in the right setup, you can really do some damage. I know I caught a lot of opponents off guard with this deck. You can see in this first clip, I'm able to defeat a Hydreigon deck. That's right, one of the meta decks I am able to take out with this Single Strike Urshifu and Pangoro deck. So don't sleep on this deck. A very good deck, a very good combination. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, definitely give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much in advance for doing so. It does really help out me and my channel. On top of that, I come out with a lot of different deck builds for Pokemon TCG Pocket. So if you don't want to miss a beat, I come out with some unique deck builds like this one, and I come out with some meta deck builds, or at least I go over the meta deck builds that a lot of people are using. I'm also going to come out with more videos in terms of Pokemon TCG Pocket, and I do some other video games as well, so make sure you check those out if you're a gamer who loves other games as well. Without further ado, let's talk about this deck. Let's talk about Single Strike Urshifu. I absolutely love this card. It is a phenomenal card, especially in the right setup. So it has an ability and it also has an attack. Its ability is it's a double type Pokemon. As long as Single Strike Urshifu is in play, it is both fighting and dark type. So that's really interesting because it can combine well with cards that coincide for both dark and fighting. So if you have a fighting type card, and I'll get to it in a second, such as a Korrina that only works for fighting type Pokemon, it works with Single Strike Urshifu. So it's really cool that you can combine fighting type cards or cards meant for only fighting types with Single Strike Urshifu that is also a dark type, and you can see it has the dark type border signifying that it's a dark type. It also requires dark type energy, so that's really cool as well. Now it does require dark type energy, as I was just mentioning. It requires 2 dark and 1 colorless for Power Blast, 110 damage, so a decent amount of damage for 3 energy. You do discard a dark energy from the Pokemon though, so that's something to note, that you are going to have to discard a dark energy. Single Strike Urshifu just released with the Pulsing Aura packs. Now, I want to talk about Kubfu for a second because it does really help out both Urshifus in the game. There are 2 different ones. There's a Rapid Strike that's water type, and then there's Single Strike, which is the dark type. But Kubfu has an attack. When I call it an attack, it's a move that for 1 colorless energy is training. So you get to take a colorless energy from your energy zone and you attach it to Kubfu. So if you have 1 dark energy already equipped, you get the first turn where you get to equip energy, so you start second. Your opponent gets the first turn. You can equip a dark energy, you attack with training, and when I say attack, you get to utilize the move. You equip that colorless energy, and then on the next turn, you can evolve into Single Strike Urshifu and start attacking with another dark energy equipped. So it's really nice that Kubfu does enhance the energy buildup on both Single Strike Urshifu and Rapid Strike if you are into a Rapid Strike deck. But you can start attacking as soon as you evolve if you did get training off to equip that colorless energy. So Kubfu does enhance Single Strike Urshifu a little bit, which is really nice. Next, let's talk about Pangoro, the other Pokemon in this deck that's going to be attacking. You can see I have a Lucario, but this does not run fighting type energy. Lucario is just there to enhance the damage of your Urshifu. But I want to talk about Pangoro. Pangoro is an interesting card and an interesting pairing for Single Strike Urshifu. It is a dark type Pokemon, which is nice. It also only requires 1 dark energy. So we saw earlier, Single Strike Urshifu is going to be discarding dark energy after every attack, which means every new turn, we're going to have to keep equipping dark type energy onto Single Strike Urshifu. It is a little bit of a downside for that card. However, if you're able to put a Pancham onto the playing field and then you're able to evolve into a Pangoro, if your Single Strike Urshifu does go down, it only costs you 1 point. This deck has no EX, no Mega Pokemon, so you're only losing 1 point every time a Pokemon goes down. If you do lose Single Strike Urshifu, you can put Pangoro into that active spot, equip a single energy, and start attacking right away while you're delaying for your second Single Strike Urshifu to build up the required energy to start attacking when it's ready. So Pangoro attacks for Overdrive Smash, which does 30 damage on its first attack. However, during your next turn, Pangoro's Overdrive Smash does plus 30 damage. So after that initial 30, you can deal 60 damage. So that's really nice, is that, yes, the first turn is only going to be 30 damage, but you can start attacking with 60 damage afterwards, so you can deal a decent chunk of damage while you're building up a Single Strike Urshifu, and it could be your first Single Strike Urshifu. You may start the battle with your Pancham in the active spot, and then you evolve into Pangoro. Again, it only costs 1 energy, so you're not investing a lot of energy into it. You hit for 30, then you're hitting consecutively for 60, while you're building up your Single Strike Urshifu on the bench to deal the excessive amount of damage that I'm about to talk about. So Pangoro is a great combination because you're dealing 60 damage over and over and over again, only requires 1 energy, and it has a decent amount of HP. 120 HP is no slouch whatsoever. Meanwhile, building up the Single Strike Urshifu on the bench, getting ready to attack the opponents. Now I have Oriolu and Lucario in this deck for a reason. Lucario's ability, its attacks are nothing. They mean nothing because I do not have fighting energy in this deck. However, Lucario's ability, Fighting Coach. Attacks used by your fighting Pokemon do plus 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Remember, once Single Strike Urshifu is on the playing field, it now is a dual type, both fighting and dark. So Lucario's ability, Fighting Coach, does enhance Single Strike Urshifu. So now that 110 damage with a Lucario on the playing field does 130 damage. But of course, that's not all for this deck. Let's go and talk about the stadium in this deck. And I have decided to go with 1 training area because it enhances, or 2 training areas, just 1 stadium. But I've decided to go with the 1 stadium training area twice because it enhances both Pangoro and Single Strike Urshifu. However, if you want to go with a training area and arena of antiquity, you can do that as well, because Arena of Antiquity can enhance your Urshifu even more. But training area attacks used by stage 1 Pokemon, this is both yours and your opponent's, do plus 10 damage. So now Pangoro's 60 goes to 70 damage for 1 energy, and you're going to continually attack with that while you're building up your Single Strike Urshifu on the bench. The 110 damage, if training area is on the playing field for Single Strike Urshifu, goes up to 120. But if we have that Lucario that I just mentioned, now that 120 goes up to 140. So now it's 140 damage in which you can KO in 1 hit a lot of prominent Pokemon. I'm thinking of Suicune EX that has 140 HP, Entei EX that has 140 HP. A lot of very popular Pokemon have 140 HP. So now we're 1 hit KOing a lot of very popular Pokemon with our 140 damage. So that's really cool as well. But that's why I have Training Area in here, because it enhances both Pangoro and Single Strike Urshifu. You could go with Arena of Antiquity, like I said, if you just want to power up your Shifu even further. But I like the stadium that powers up both cards, both Pokemon that I'm going to be attacking with. Next, I want to talk about Karina. Karina is really nice for Single Strike Urshifu. Again, another card that enhances fighting type Pokemon. I have one Karina, but Karina, during this turn, attacks used by your fighting Pokemon do plus 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. So now, that 140 that I was just talking about jumps up to 170. So now, Single Strike Urshifu can do 170 damage to an opponent's active Pokemon EX. That's absolutely phenomenal. Now, a lot of Mega Pokemon are not going to be one-hit KO'd by that, but you are going to put them in two-hit KO range. And again, remember, Single Strike Urshifu is only one lost point. We lose a Single Strike Urshifu. If we do have Pangoro on the bench, that 170 in 2 turns, coupled with Pangoro, is now 200 damage. You're going to be able to 2-hit KO with that combination a lot of different Pokemon in the game. Mega Lucario only has 190 HP, so your opponent is either going to have to find a way to heal, or your opponent is going to have to find a way to retreat their Pokemon, and just hope that you don't Cyrus them, which I do have a Cyrus in this deck. I also have a Sabrina. So you're going to be facing a lot of Pokemon that, yes, either you're going to one-hit KO because you're up to 170 damage, or you're going to be able to two-hit KO with a combination of your Shifu and a bench Pokemon, or maybe your Shifu itself, because your opponent may recognize, my enemy just hit me for 170 damage. If I stay in this active spot, I'm going to go down. So it's going to force a retreat. Hopefully you have your Cyrus by that point, or even a Sabrina if your opponent only has one bench Pokemon, and you can finish that Pokemon off. So it's going to catch a lot of opponents off guard that you're dealing so much damage with Single Strike Urshifu, especially because if they take it out, it is not going to be the end of the world. Again, it's only 1 lost point to potentially their 3 lost points, because they may be utilizing Mega Pokemon. So it's a great combination. It's also a nice deck to go into solo battles with if you do have solo battles that you have to defeat without EX Pokemon. This deck really works for that as well. But that's just an added bonus for this deck. Again, we have Cyrus and Sabrina in this deck because a lot of Pokemon, a lot of opponents are going to be retreating if we're not finishing them off. 170 damage is absolutely phenomenal with Single Strike Urshifu. However, there are Pokemon that a lot of people are using that are probably going to be able to retreat after you deal that damage. So you're just going to have to be aware that Cyrus and Sabrina are going to have to be utilized. They are crucial for this deck. I know I say it with a lot of decks because I love these 2 cards, but they are absolutely crucial for this deck. Now, the hopes is that Single Strike Urshifu is out in that active spot as quickly as possible, or Pangoro is out in that active spot as quickly as possible, where you're dealing 70 damage potentially with Pangoro because of Training Area and Overdrive Smash, doing that double damage after your first turn, or your Single Strike Urshifu is being powered up by Kubfu, and you're out on that second turn attacking for 110 damage. Meanwhile, you're building up the cards. Maybe you get Training Area to put it up to 120, you get your Lucario on the bench to put it up to 140, and then your Karina is kind of waiting in the wings for your opponent to put an EX Pokemon in that spot, so you can deal that added bonus damage up to 170. And again, it's going to catch a lot of Pokemon, a lot of opponents off guard. It's going to KO with 1 strike a lot of just EX Pokemon in general. Mega Pokemon, it's going to take 2 hits, but you will be dealing a bunch of damage. In 2 turns, your max amount of damage, you can be dealing over 300 damage. Remember, with Lucario and Training Area. Single Strike Urshifu is 140 damage. On that one turn, you can get Karina, so that's 170. So in 2 turns, you can be dealing 310 damage. There aren't many Pokemon that are going to be able to survive that. Of course, those Pokemon who are going to need a massive amount of healing. They're going to need their Lily. They're going to need Lucky Ice Pops for a few flips. They're going to need a lot of healing to be able to survive that amount of damage. So your opponent's going to have to get really lucky if they want to survive 2 attacks from Single Strike Urshifu. It's going to be unlikely, but there are some decks that do run a lot of healing. Just going to have to be aware of that. But still, when you're attacking with Single Strike Urshifu, you're going to be able to defeat a lot of opponents. As I mentioned earlier, I was able to defeat a Hydreigon deck. I've gone through some of the meta decks in this game with this deck. So this is a viable deck. It can absolutely compete, and it can catch a lot of opponents off guard. Nobody's expecting this deck because a lot of players, rightfully so, they like utilizing those Mega Pokemon. Those Mega Pokemon are very powerful. Mega Lucario, I myself love utilizing Mega Lucario. I've come up with 4 or 5 different decks with Mega Lucario just because I love Lucario so much as a Pokemon. There's Mega Magnezone that a lot of players are using. There's Mega Altaria that's still a phenomenal card. So a lot of players are focused on those cards. They're going to be sleeping on this deck. So what's even better about opponents sleeping on a deck like this is they don't know the strategy. They don't know what's about to hit them. If you're facing a Mega Altaria deck, you kind of know what's about to hit you. You've seen it before. You know that Mega Altaria is going to be paired with one of a few combinations. It could be an Igglybuff Darkrai combination. It could be a Gourgeist combination. But you kind of know what's coming. When you face an opponent's deck that you've never faced before, you don't know what's coming. So this deck can catch a lot of opponents off guard because they don't know what's coming. How are they going to handle a Single Strike Urshifu? How are they going to handle a Pangoro? They have no idea. When you throw out that Railu, they automatically think, they're probably going to think, even though you have Dark Energy, that you may have a Mega Lucario stashed in there. And that's not going to be the case. You have no Mega Lucario in this deck. This is a dark deck, no fighting type energy. Your opponents may think this is going to be an easy match, that maybe it's a dual energy fighting and dark. They're going to be really shocked to find that this has no Mega Lucario, that this is not a fighting deck in the essence of fighting energy. It is a fighting deck in terms of Single Strike Urshifu is a fighting type Pokemon when it's on the playing field, which is really cool. I love that they did that. I think that's awesome that they made Pokemon dual type Pokemon so you can utilize cards like Corina, Arena of Antiquity, Lucario with these cards, which is really cool. I look forward in the future to seeing more dual type cards like that. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this deck. Have you developed a Single Strike Urshifu deck? What do you think of the card itself? I absolutely love that it's dual energy. What do you think about dual energy cards? Leave me a comment and let me know. Let's talk anything Pokemon TCG Pocket in the comment section. If there's a Pokemon, if there's a card you want to see a deck built around, might be a Pokemon that no one's utilizing, let me know in the comment section and I'll build a deck around it. I love building unique decks. I love building decks that can compete with meta decks and catch opponents off guard. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Definitely give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and until next time, peace.